I'm really honored to be here and to kick off RSA. I'm joined by Manny Medrano. Manny runs the State Department SOC, and I'm Kelly Fletcher, and I'm the CIO of the State Department. Today we're going to tell a story, and it's a story that some of you probably heard. It was covered by the Cyber Safety Review Board pretty thoroughly, and it's about China hacking the State Department along with a number of other organizations last summer. But before we tell you the story, I want to talk a little bit about what we do at the State Department. So if you Google State Department mission, you will see that it is our mission to protect and promote U.S. security, prosperity, and democratic values. And I think this is the coolest job in the world. A couple of things that we do in that framework is we help American citizens. So if you're an American and you're overseas, and you lose your passport, or you get arrested, or you got some kind of problem, we help Americans in those situations. This is the most important thing I'm going to say today. If you are an American citizen and you go overseas, you should register with the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program, STEP. It takes about 15 minutes. And what we do when you've done that is, if something happens, if there's a natural disaster wherever you're visiting, we will send you emails or text messages that give you instructions on how to get help. So this is a big part of what we do, is we have overseas presence and we help Americans. Another thing we do is we help folks who want to come to the US. So I don't know if anyone in this audience traveled to the United States for this conference and needed a visa. But if you did, that's also a State Department function, is we hand out visas. We help folks come to visit here. And then the biggest and sort of most important thing that we do is we engage with folks overseas in order to meet our mission, right? To protect and promote US security and democracy and democratic values. Some of the things we engage on really pertain to folks in this world, right? What are norms around cybersecurity or privacy or data? Some of it is about labor or about totally unrelated issues. At this conference, we have two really important people from state who are going to speak later on. First, the first ambassador at large for cyberspace and digital policy, Ambassador Nate Fick. His job is to figure out how do we best engage on issues of cyber and digital. And he will be speaking on Wednesday. I really encourage you all to go. And also, the Secretary of the State Department, Secretary Blinken, will be speaking later today. And I think that is absolutely, shouldn't be missed by anyone. So, okay, that's the State Department overall. What do I do? So I'm the CIO of the State Department, and it's my job to provision technology. And some of that's for State Department internally, and some of it is for engaging with Americans in general. But I think the most important thing I do is it's my job to make sure that we're protecting our data. It's really important that our diplomats, our employees can talk to each other, and that information doesn't go to anyone else, that information is protected and secured. It's also really important that their communications work. This is something that we call silent running, right? That you come in the morning, your email works, there's an emergency, and you still have communications. This is really, really important. Before I had this job, I was the Principal Deputy CIO at the Department of Defense. And when the State Department talked to me about joining the State Department, I thought, why is this going to be so hard, right? I come from this really big organization, really global, and the State Department said to me, you don't know global until you've been at state. And I thought to myself, And then I got to the State Department. And we're very different. So we're in 190 countries, we have 270 locations, and we live in these countries. This is not an expeditionary force that is carrying their own communications equipment. We are using local telephone numbers to call a baker, right? We are buying our shoes, we are buying our food, we are buying the internet. We are living in these countries, and we're living there for years. So some of our embassies and consulates, the building has been there for decades and decades, and individuals are there for between 1 and 4 years. We live in these places. The other thing that makes the State Department really distinct and a challenging place to secure data is that it is our job to engage with foreign nationals where we're living. It's our job to engage. For those of you who have been in cybersecurity for a long time, I think you probably remember the time where if someone got phished, they got sort of scolded. You shouldn't have clicked on that, and we're going to train you again, and naughty, this is on you. It's an all of workforce mission here, and you've screwed up. At the State Department, it is our job to open emails from foreign nationals. That's our job. From people we don't know. And it is our job to open the attachment that they include. So this is a really challenging job, is to protect our data. And what we've decided to do, knowing that we've accepted a lot of risk by physically where we are and by the kind of work we do, we've prioritized network visibility. Because I think the SOC has some of the best people in the world. And as long as they can see what's happening, we've got a chance to respond and to recover. So with that, Manny, will you talk a little about the SOC?
Yeah, definitely, Kelly. So thank you. First of all, good morning, everybody. I hope you're doing good. You probably got 3 or 4 or 5 cups of coffee already, right? If you're jet lagged, that's okay. So a few things, right, that are going on. So first of all, thank you. Great introduction. And as you can see, there's never a down moment at the State Department, right? So a little bit about me, right, before we get started. So my name is Manuel Medrano. I'm also known as Manny. I've been with the State Department for 14 years. I have been overseas and domestic, and I've also had different portfolios throughout my career, my tenure at the State Department. Right now, I have the privilege of working for the Bureau of Diplomatic Security. And the Bureau of Diplomatic Security, right, at like the State Department, is the law enforcement side of the State Department. So, and this is extremely important because as we tell this story, there's gonna be some nuggets. So pay attention to that because there will be a quiz later on this. Thank you. Okay, we're awake. So that means yes. Okay, good. We're awake. So there's going to be a quiz later on. I'm just kidding. There will be no quiz. All right. But it's very important so that you can kind of realize, right, how the story about how all this incident response work, like Kelly mentioned, right? And some of our special agents got us there. But I'm not going to get too ahead of that for right now. So in diplomatic security, our mission is to protect our facilities, our personnel, and our information, domestic and overseas. That is quite the mission, right, Kelly? It is complicated, but like I mentioned before, right, I used to have a lot of hair 14 years ago, and that hair is now gone. And I am very happy to have left every single piece of hair along the way of this mission, because I care a lot about this mission. But with that, we also have special agents, and we actually have one that is sitting here today in the audience, who focuses on cyber security. And that is, what they do is they focus on cyber investigation and forensic analysis. If you do not have these capabilities within your organization, like we at the State Department, Kelly is going to tell you a little bit about who and how you can get some of those resources as well, if you're not there. But what this is important is because our special agents, we have specific authorities. And we can seize cyber threat actor infrastructure. Key. So keep that in mind. That will be a quiz question, by the way. So make sure you remember that. Because that is fundamental as the story went through, right? And how we're here today to tell this story and how it was such a global impact. So remember, we have the authorities to seize threat actor infrastructure. That means the virtual private servers, and then we can do some analysis with that as well. Now, like any SOC operations, right, we do have standard procedures, we have playbooks, but what we also created, right, is what we call a significant incident response framework. And what we did is, because the normal SOC operates 24/7, but then we created this framework so that whenever we have a significant event, right, we can definitely reach out to resources within the State Department, outside the State Department, or inner agency as well, so that we can all bring them all together and then be able to work on defending that incident as well. So that's what we did. We stood up that task force as well for this purpose. But before I go on, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the men and women who are back in Washington, because they are the ones, the incident responders, the threat hunters, our special agents, our diplomatic technology officers, our regional cybersecurity officers, all the personnel that have worked on various events with us. They are the ones who deserve this credit. That's why Kelly and I are standing here today, thanks to them. They're the ones who deserve the credit. Also, I want to thank some of my colleagues who are in the audience today. They deserve the credit as well, because this is a team sport, the art of the possible. It can be done by team sport, right? So it is now we have to come together and work together. Our private sector partners, our interagencies as well, right? It is now where we have to come together, and they're the ones who we have to thank for all the hard work. I always tell the team, in SOC operations, it is a 24/7 operations. There's no doubt about it. But it is extremely important, right, to recognize the work of some of them who work night shifts, weekends, holidays. They take time away from their families as well because they care for this mission. Just like Kelly said, we have a very unique and awesome mission at the State Department. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself because I tend to do that a lot, right? So Kelly, let's kick it off. Why don't we tell the story?
Okay, so last summer, Storm 558 hacked Microsoft email accounts. In total, 22 organizations and over 500 people were hacked. This started in May. The State Department was hacked in June. No one had seen it. No one had identified that this was happening. And when it started in June, we at the State Department saw something weird, and we eventually realized that it was a hack. The Cyber Safety Review Board put out a really good report that sort of went through who did what when, how did this happen. Manny and I are here not to just go over that report, but to talk about what were the people who were actually making decisions, how were they making those decisions, who did they call to make those decisions, who helped them make decisions as a team, and what did they know when? What bad hypotheses were they working under for days? That is what we can tell you as the people who are sitting front row for this to happen. Another thing that we want to talk about today is a little bit of what we did right and wrong. I will tell you that I am so proud that we saw this, and I am so proud that because we saw it, Microsoft stopped this hack globally. And there are times when I thought, oops, would have done this different if I had known this was going to happen. So I'm going to share that as well, and I hope it's a benefit. So we're going to start with stuff that we did long before I worked at the State Department that was really, really smart and is the only reason that we could see this. So, Manny?
Thank you, Kelly. And just like Kelly mentioned, right, so this predates Kelly and I, right, in our roles. And going back to thanking a lot of our employees, right, because there's a lot of institutional knowledge that has happened here. Yeah, I mean, it's true, right? We have dealt with events in the past, right? That is a true statement. And therefore, we have learned as well. And the threat actors have definitely shifted their tactics as well against us. That is true as well, right? And as you all can see, the threat landscape continues to evolve, right? Tactics change, technology is changing. But as a result of that, we learned as well, right? And in partnership with Microsoft, we work very hard as well, and with our interagencies, and we purchased the G5 licenses a while back ago. And what that is that premium package that allows us to have more telemetry down to the specific mailbox items, right? So that you can definitely create those alerts. Without having purchased this premium package, right, we would not have access to that specific login, and we would have been able to create that custom alert. And one of the great things about this, right, is that we were able to create the alert that analyzed the data, all right, for a container called mail items access within, and Microsoft helped us with all of this. And what we did is it tracked any access on Microsoft Exchange Online for any mailboxes to identify any anomalous activity. So as you can tell, we created the alert, and the custom alert did pay off, definitely, and that's why we're actually here today. So let's go ahead and kick it off a little bit and to provide more details about how that went, Kelly.
So when the alert kicked off, very honestly, we have seen false positives with this alert. It kicks, we have seen it fire, and it's not been an indicator of unauthorized activity. It's been an indicator of unusual activity. But in this case, it was something else. And I will tell you, Manny's going to talk about what happened when the alert fired. But I do want to highlight one other quick thing before we get to the alert firing, which is so in addition to having this really robust licensing, which is now available to the federal government broadly, and then also creating this custom alert and having trained personnel, another thing we had done is we built relationships. And I would say this can't be undervalued. Manny and I are up here. It is not by accident that we are together doing this. And we knew each other before this alert fired. And we had actually had a little positive friction, right? And I think that's good, because certainly during the event, we had some positive friction. And we had really good relationships with our vendor. We had really good relationships with the interagency. So when it got really exciting, we knew everyone that we had to call. We had relationships, we had trust, and that was really important. So part of that trust is, while our SOC is 24/7 and while our IT professionals keeping the network running are also 24/7, as individuals, we are not. And when that alert fired, I was enjoying life. I had no idea what was happening and what was coming for me. But Manny, it came from Manny first. So Manny, what happened that day?
Yep, Kelly, thank you. So first of all, we never disagree.
Not true.
Yeah, right. Of course we disagree and we agree, definitely, right? So that's part of this process. So one thing that I did forget to say was the name of the custom alert, because you have geeks, right? You've got professionals, and you need to have also, you have to enjoy a little bit, right? So they call it Big Yellow Taxi. Don't ask me how in the world we came up with that, but it's called Big Yellow Taxi, and that is now a thing in the office where it's like, if Big Yellow Taxi fires up, no good, right? So that's what we did. But just like Kelly said, right? So the false positives, right? So the custom alert fires up. And there's a lot of this that happens in the SOC where we get a lot of false positive alerts. And that's normal process in the SOC. So this time was a little bit different. And here's the reason why. It was a pattern. That's what got the analyst to think a little bit more, right? So then, before I get too far away, I'm gonna tell a little bit of a story. And this is a true story. So I walk in, and there's, in the office, if you see a group of like 3 or 4 of the analysts, and they're together, and they're the same ones, and they're talking, that is not good. That means something's going on. We all know already this, and we're like, hey, did you see that person on site? It's like, yep. It's like, what's going on? That's usually what happens. So I come into the office that morning, and I'm just like, I have a lot of things going on, my day-to-day operations, right? I had like 7 cups of coffee, no, only 3, all right? And then from there, so then I was like, I walked out the hallway, and then I see this guy, this individual. And he's one of the ones that created the alert, along with others. And he's one of our threat hunters. And I asked, what are you doing here? His response is, oh, Manny, an alert fire up. It's like, okay. And not to mention that this is his telework day. And he's on site. So, of course, I used to do cyber threat intelligence before, so I'm already putting patterns together, analyzing, and my head is going and spinning out of control, right? I have learned to calm myself down a little bit. Sometimes it doesn't work. So what we did is I asked, I said, what's going on? He says, well, Manny, you know the alert fire up. I said, which alert? Big Yellow Taxi. Of course, immediately my mind starts thinking, it's like, this is not good. Second, he starts telling me a little bit more about what happened, right? And the main thing was the pattern. So what we did is they had already contacted the vendor, in this case Microsoft, part of our SOC operations, right? Immediately we contacted. Then we also now have an IP address, which is an indicator, right? That's gonna be important because now I have 2 nuggets for you. First nugget is the law enforcement part. Second nugget is now we have an IP address. Stay tuned for more nuggets as we complete the story. Then from there, right, so we get the IP address. They have identified the IP address already. And then we have baseline the victims, right, that are being targeted by this activity, right? So we're kind of trying to get some information. We at least have an IP. We're analyzing, but it's too early to tell much, right? And of course, if you ever done incident response, right, leadership wants to know. Once you tell leadership, number of questions come, then you have to play that balance, and that's when Kelly and I will disagree, and then we will agree, and they will be happily together. So what happens is, so then again, the alert was not really a point to escalate, but the pattern was. I want to emphasize that. As part of my role, right, and throughout the years of experience that I've been, right, at State Department, I have learned also that a good leader also has people surrounding you, right, that can agree and disagree with you as well. So what we did is whenever I got a message later on as I was going through my day, and I got a Teams message, and the leader of the SOC tells me, Manny, do you have a few minutes to talk? I kind of had an idea, my red flags are going everywhere, but then I said, sure, let me know. He's like, well, we need to talk in person. Boom, I'm like, oh boy. This is it. My evening is already done. I'm sure this is going to be interesting. But then I have also been taught by my own folks, right? It's like, Manny, calm down, focus. and then just start asking some questions. Well, I've been working on that. I'm not going to tell you that I have perfected that, but I'm kind of working on that as well. So what I did immediately is I called the rest of my colleagues into the office, right? So there were some of my colleagues, other office directors, some people from the SOC, and then also the lead of the SOC, and then everything that I just told you is being pretty much briefed to everyone, right? So then we're having this conversation, and the main question was, do we know the attack vector? We didn't. Second of all, right, where is this, like, who's really responsible for this? We didn't. How is this happening? We don't know. And then the other one was, do we need to tell our leadership, right? Because I knew some of the questions that were already going to be asked. The decision collectively was made that we needed to tell our leadership because of the pattern. This is something of concern. And the key was too early to tell because there's still some analysis that needs to be completed. So we inform our leadership, and then our leadership, then diplomatic security reaches out to the CIO, and then Kelly, you got a call.
That's right. So this is when Manny ruined my day, is how I would describe it.
I tend to do that a lot. No. Just
but
kidding.
I'm so thankful that Manny called me. And this is a place where I think I just want to highlight, like, Manny did something brave, which is to say, like, we don't know everything, but we know enough to know, like, this could be bad. And then I had to sort of make the same decision, right? Do I call the federal CISO? Do I tell my boss? Do I tell my boss's boss? Do I raise the flag at my level? Do I call CISA? Even though we had done all the right reporting sort of at the lower level, do I, like, flag this as, like, this might be a thing? And I thought about it, and then I sent an email, and I actually read that email just before coming here to see if it said what I remembered it said. And it did. It said basically, like, hey, guys, Kelly from the State Department, we're seeing something weird. And we don't know if it's unauthorized or not, because at the time, we honestly didn't know. Said, if you're available, right, if you have some folks, we'd love help. And if not, that's cool. We'll keep you updated. But it had no meaningful information because we didn't know. All we knew is that we were seeing something weird and there was a pattern and we were scared, but we weren't sure that it was unauthorized. And I want to say this was the best decision I could have made because we told our partners, right, our interagency partners, and they parachuted in people or got ready to parachute in people to help. And I flagged for my leadership, this might be something that we're going to have to talk a lot about. Get ready, get ready. And if it had turned out to be nothing, which it didn't, we could have just moved on. But this was brave and hard. But I think that it made it so that as this event happened over the course of the following days, my colleagues and peers throughout the interagency were ready to help and were ready to talk to me about this. They had their folks engaged, and we had engagement at all levels. So I sent that email, and then I waited for the SOC to tell me what was happening. So, Manny?
Yep. So Kelly, of course, we work overnight, so we continue to find out what's going on, right? And like Kelly mentioned, right, so the way I like to describe, so we are the State Department, right? So we work on diplomacy. And diplomacy is an art, right? Incident response is also an art because you will have established frameworks, you have established processes, but every incident will be different, most likely. And you're gonna have to try different theories, and then you might actually come back and they prove false, and then you have to try something else, right? The key is how fast do you do that in order to then meet also the leadership request as well. So what happened is the SOC is continuing to work overnight, right? Because at this point we do have a task force in place already. So we're working 24/7 as part of our operations, right? And what we're trying to do is figure out what is really happening, right? Where is this coming from? And one thing that we learned is because there's a lot of events that happen, right? That the State Department is definitely involved in. And thanks to our cyber threat intelligence team, right, we have actually built now a process where we start looking at any geopolitical events that may be happening or other events that pertain to the State Department. And what we did is quickly we identified, right, that the employees that were being targeted on this worked on China-related issues. So they had a China-related portfolio. That was extremely important, right, to know. Because now we're like, okay, we're a little bit putting the puzzle together, but we still don't know everything, but at least it's coming together. And the alerts that we had were to fire every hour, not long enough to mitigate, right, a lot of the activity that was going on, but we still had not a lot of good information. We had to continue to do some of the analysis. And then from there, right, so we're focusing on what is really happening, right? There were a lot of questions, I still remember, in that room. Often, if you do incident response, you probably notice that there's a lot of questions at the beginning, not a lot of answers. The answers start coming slowly, and then you start to take the picture together. And sometimes the puzzle will never be completed, right? It's just the way it is. But then also, right, communication. It's extremely important, right? You have to be able to communicate, because then that leads to a lot of assumptions and perception. Now, at the same time that the SOC is doing a lot of the analysis, Kelly has informed a lot of the leadership as well. So then questions are coming in already, right? So then we're having to balance the analysis, right, along with also the communication back to Kelly and the leadership at the State Department, right? So then what we do is we enable more logging, more in-depth logging, right? We're starting to look into okay, so our threat intel team identified that we have folks working on China-related issues, and they're traveling. So we're thinking mobile devices, right? So we're like, hey, this might lead us, start getting us closer to this. Well, there's some more of the story later, but for right now, that's where we are. So we're thinking mobile devices, right? And there's some things that we did. At the same time, here's nugget number 3. So the SOC, while all this is going on, our special agents submit a preservation request to Department of Justice so that we can legally seize the threat actor infrastructure. That is already going on because we had the IP, the process is already ongoing, right? So we got 2 parallel things going at the same time. Stay tuned for nugget number 5 or 4. I lost count at this point, but it's the next nugget, all right? You know the coffee is already starting to wear down, all right? And because that's gonna be fundamental as we move forward through this story. So Kelly, how did you take that news?
Okay, so at this point, just to sort of like, what are we doing? At this time, we have this theory, and this is what the SOC tells me, and this is what Manny just said. We think that we have access happening through token theft and replay from mobile devices, and these specific individuals' mobile devices have been hacked. And honestly, okay, so first, spoiler alert, that is not what was going on. And if that had been what was going on, that's still pretty bad. But the good news is it's containable, right? Like it's specific devices, we can get those, we can do things to contain this. So we are working with this theory at this time. And I actually thought in the moment, oh gosh, what if it's not just these specific mobile devices, but all mobile devices? That would be really bad. Again, that was very naive. Turns out it was everything, but we'll get to that. So as we're watching this access happen, and as we're increasing our logging so that we can mitigate it, we had to have a hard conversation about collecting information versus taking action. And this is something that I think every incident responder has gone through. How do you balance these two things? And I will tell you, while we're in the middle of this and no one has been sleeping very much, and we're feeling pretty stressed out, that was not the time for me to first consider how to balance these two competing priorities. That was the wrong time to do that. We really needed a framework for that. We have it now, but a framework for how do you make the decision for when you monitor what's happening to try to figure out what is going on versus when do you take action and immediately stop activity, even if it alerts the adversary that you know what's happening. So I needed a framework for that, and I also needed a framework to talk to my leadership about it, to say this is the decision I'm making and this is why. We made a framework in the moment, and we executed it, but I will say that's a place where I thought to myself, oh, I should have thought a bit more about this before right now. The other thing that we did, and I'm so excited about what the law enforcement side of the house was doing, and for those of you who do not work in an organization where there are men and women with badges and guns who work there, I would say, call the FBI. This is part of what the FBI does for the private sector. So if you find yourself in exactly this situation where your SOC doesn't know what's going on, but you have an IP address, and maybe it would make sense to get some infrastructure, the FBI will help you. But at the State Department, we had the State Department, men and women doing this. The other thing that I think was really smart that Manny highlighted and that I was thankful for is that we were looking at global events. So not only could we tell what individuals had had their emails inappropriately accessed, but also we knew that there was a lot happening in the domain with like chips pertaining to China. The secretary was visiting China. There was a lot happening in that space geopolitically in that moment, specific to the State Department. And that was something that it was useful for us to think about as we considered what might be happening here. And frankly, it raised, I think, like the threat level for us. Like we thought, oh, this is almost certainly, unauthorized and intentional because of all the things that were happening geopolitically. So, but the bottom line is, in this moment, we still don't know what's happening or how it's happening. We know that there's unauthorized access to email, and we're working really hard to figure out how to stop it, not just in the moment, but also more broadly. So, Manny?
Yep, Kelly, so then we are the State Department, so we're global, right? But before we get there, let's see if you're awake. So I mentioned 3 nuggets. I did my count already. So what is the first one that I talked about? IP address. No.
Good guess, good guess.
First one. Law enforcement. All right, good. I don't have any candy to give out, so I'm sorry for that. What is the second one? IP address. What is the third one? The C's. All right, so we're paying attention. That's good. I'm happy for that. Okay. I used to be a teacher, by the way. All right, so let's go and keep going. So we're global, right, Kelly? So we got all of our foreign service, civil service. We got employees in 240 locations overseas. And what do? We send out our couriers. We send out our regional cybersecurity officers, diplomatic technology officers, because we need to get the hands on those phones, right? We knew that that might be a threat vector, so we mobilize everyone so we can get him back to Washington so that we can do some of that analysis. So kudos again to the team that we had, because they immediately reacted, they took action, and we're going for it. At the same time, guess what? Nugget number 4. The virtual private server arrives in the lab. And then we begin the analysis. So keep that on the side. I am going to test you again, don't worry. All right? So that is happening while all this is going on with the mobile devices, right? And then we begin to invalidate any of those affected tokens as well, right? Because we were definitely thinking these tokens were stolen, they're doing the token replay, we definitely need to block this access, right? So we're like, okay, maybe we're trying to find out, we're like, okay, we're getting closer to where this is coming from. This might be good news. And then the other thing that we did as well is we changed the alerting from 1 hour to 15 minutes so that we can be able to mitigate this a little as well, so that we can react faster. So then what we did is, yeah, we had some hope, right? There was some cheers in the room, but we're like, I've always learned this. Do not cheer too soon because you never know what's going to happen. Remember when I said theory 1 sometimes may prove false and they have to start at theory number 2? Well, something like that might have happened. So, Kelly, we told you about this, and I think you kind of had some hope.
Yeah, I cheered too soon. So we watched activity that night, and there was no unauthorized access. And I thought, oh, we disabled these tokens. It was just these mobile devices. We are in the clear. It was great. I took a really big sigh of relief. And then Manny ruined my day again.
Well, Kelly, yes. And I'm sorry that I ruined your day. I'll get you another coffee as well. No. So, yes. And like I mentioned before, right? So, as part of incident response, you have to try different things. And yes, so as we were thinking that it was the mobile devices, we come back to Washington, we're analyzing, we're also looking at the logs. And unfortunately, right, with the logs, right, we are now beginning to see, and it reveals correlation between legit tokens, right, delivery to a device and unauthorized access to a different device. So we're like, oh no. There were other words that we said in the room, but I'm not going to mention those words here, of course, right? So we're like, this is not good. The second part of it also was unauthorized access was also authenticating now from a desktop token. We're like, not good news, right? So then immediately what we start to do is like, okay, what do we know? let's analyze, let's start getting some more indicators, let's start looking again, right, into like, okay, how do we then get back to that, right? How do we start analyzing so that we can start to figure this out right away? Because once again, leadership is aware. Leadership wants to know status, when are we ending this, how do we mitigate this, right? So we're not having to play a balance here. And as the day continues and the hours, right, that gets definitely more and more complicated. It's a balance that we have to play, right? So then, Kelly, of course, we have to tell you about this and what happens. How did you take those news as the CIO?
So what I have written here, which is true, is it was a dark night of the soul for me. It was this hearing that there were unauthorized tokens coming from now hitting desktops, hearing that we were seeing legitimate tokens being minted. This showed me that it wasn't these specific users probably, and it certainly wasn't just their mobile devices. And I had this moment that I remember standing in my office and wondering if our adversaries could access anything they wanted to whenever they wanted to. And I'll tell you, they could. They could. And at the time, I did not imagine that it was actually that they could access anything they wanted in the Microsoft Office 365 environment for almost every organization in the world. But that was in fact the case. I thought it was for the State Department only. And in that moment, I really felt like, very frankly, I was failing at my core mission. The reason I work at the Department of State is because I believe in the mission. I believe that we should be able to have communications that are internal to the State Department, and we were failing at that. And in this moment, this is when I was so thankful that I had been talking to the interagency because I needed a friend. I was tired and I was scared, and I really felt like we were failing. And I called someone at CISA who knew what was happening, and this person helped me sort of make a plan, right? Talked me off the ledge. They hadn't been in the fight for the past week. They knew what was going on, and they helped me figure out, in the future, we can block access. So if we see inappropriate access, we can block it pretty fast. It's not a perfect solution, and it doesn't permanently solve the problem, but we should take that action and feel confident in taking that action. So that was one thing we plan to do in the future. And then as I'm doing this, the SOC is continuing to try to figure out what is causing this. And honestly, for me, just being able to call someone who had been to this kind of rodeo before and to hear from them like, we're gonna solve this, we're gonna figure this out, this isn't the moment you're gonna be in forever. It was very comforting. So actually, I didn't know at the time, but we were very close to figuring out what was happening and to stopping it.
So, you mentioned, right, so there were a lot of things that happened, right, whenever we learned about the unauthorized access. But then, right after that, what we noticed, right, the analysis of the virtual private server, right, comes to fruition. So, once again, the last quiz for today. What was the first nugget?
Woo!
Okay, we can do this a little bit better. Okay, what is the first nugget? There we go. Now we're talking. Okay, it's Monday. It's RSA. It's the art of the possible. I'm sure we can get this done. What is the second nugget? What is the third nugget? And the fourth? I just said it. The analysis is complete. All right, now you all get an A+. So we're gonna get coffee. Well, no, we cannot get coffee for everybody. We cannot. So disregard that. All right. So what we did is we learned, right? So the analysis is completed on the virtual private server, and we immediately learned, right? Because we're able to see the toolbox and all the tools that the threat actor is using. That is the beauty of having this capability, right? So special thanks to the special agents, and there's one actually sitting right here in front of me who is leading that team because they really deserve a lot of that credit, right? And what we did is we learned that the threat actor had actually was using a stolen Microsoft certificate, and this is as based on the report that Kelly mentioned. It is like the crown jewels for a cloud service provider to then issue other tokens, and that was basically what was going on. So at that moment, we immediately notified Microsoft, and now we're in defense mode. That means that we're tracking any access and we're blocking access, waiting until Microsoft remediates this issue on their end. Immediately, we call the CIO. I'm not going to tell you how happy she was at that point. Our leadership was also very happy, and then we were like, yeah, kudos to our law enforcement team and also the team as well, right? But here's one thing that I want to say, right? It is extremely important to have established processes, communication, teamwork, all right? That's extremely important. Our people are most important in this, and we have to make sure that we give credit to them as well. So what happens is we're working on the SOC. If we see any activity, we block it, we're playing defense, and then Microsoft invalidates the stolen certificate, right? And then they invalidate all of the other tokens that are out there as well, and then of course you all know per the report, then there's notifications that go out to a lot of people, right? So I am very proud of the State Department employees because I think the SOC, Kelly's team, everyone else did a phenomenal job on this, right? And I think that that's one of the reasons why we care so much about what we do in the mission that we have. And I think that that's why everyone here is here today, right? To learn about how we got there, right? Because this was a global impact. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself again. So Kelly, why don't you what happened after that when you get the call that it was solved?
So this was the end of the hack, and I think I felt, okay, done. Boop, boop, boop. Great job, done. And for those of you that are in highly regulated industries or other government people, no, not done, not at all. So there's a lot of reporting. So even though the hack stopped, I went to the Hill, I don't know, maybe 10 times to talk about what had happened. I reported to my leadership. I talked to the interagency. I talked to the Cyber Safety Review Board as they put together their report. And while I'm doing all this reporting on what has just happened, right, we have to remain constantly vigilant, right? Because we're still operating in Beijing and in Moscow. There are still geopolitical events happening. A big thing we did is we had to assess the impact of this. And because we had this infrastructure, we knew what had been accessed. And we have a team of folks at the State Department who go through those emails and say, what kind of information is this? So at the State Department, classified data is in a different environment. And so one of the things we ask is, was any of this data classified? And so we went through it, and the answer is no. And that was a hell of a job by the people who were sending these emails, right? They had great hygiene. They were trained. We ask, is there anything that's reputationally dangerous, right? Is there an email of somebody, talking negatively about a colleague? Nope. There were a lot of emails that said, hey, please check the other system for some information you should see. There were a lot of emails about logistics. I'm inviting you to this meeting. People are doing work with their email, but the emails that they were sending were appropriate for the environment they were in. And that's because of training, and that's because of discipline. And I was so thankful for that. The other thing I was really thankful for is CISA's role in this. So while I'm in the middle of the fight, while we're sort of recovering, waiting, making sure everything worked, CISA is communicating throughout the federal government and also with industry to some degree. This is really, really important. So I would say for those of you who are not government folks, who are industry folks, CISA is a source for information, right? The way that CISA knew about this event was because the State Department was engaging with them and they partnered with us on it, but then they shared this information. So if you were part of one of the other 21 organizations that was impacted, you would know partially because of CISA's work. And of course, Microsoft shared this information. And there's a bunch of Microsoft blogs that I would encourage you to read. So, Manny, what are your final thoughts on this?
So Kelly, there's a lot definitely. And I think that this is the moment, right, where the outcome would have been very different. And if it wasn't for the awesome team at the State Department, right? And then also our partners in our agency, right? And everyone that worked on this, because like I mentioned at the beginning, right, this is a team sport. And I think we all have and realize at this point, right, that technology is moving really fast, right? It is moving fast. And at the State Department, we have a lot of data, and data is our jewel, and we have to protect it. And what we think is that we now have to come together, and that is government, industry, other governments as well, together, right? Because this is no longer, we cannot do it alone anymore. We have to communicate, we have to work together, and especially as we move more into cloud technologies, right? And we move into other technologies, right? We do have to come together. And I think that that is extremely important. And I also want to say thank you to our law enforcement capabilities. And like Kelly said, if you don't have them within your own place, you can definitely contact the FBI. CISA is another great source as well. But the way things are going, right, we cannot do it alone. And I actually want to go back to the theme of RSA because it is the art of the possible. And that's the people side, which is coming together, right? Working together as a team. Agreeing and disagreeing, that's totally fine. But that's what makes it very, very good. And also, it's only going to get challenging, folks. This is a great story. And I think we wanted to share this, but trust me, I'm ready because I know this is the beginning for our SOC operations because it's only going to get stronger. Maybe hair will grow back up. I have no idea anymore, right? But Kelly, why don't you take us home?
So I really want to thank you all for attending today, and I really want to thank you for your passion for cybersecurity. I know some of you may be vendors that we buy software from. What I would ask from all of you is produce software that's as secure as you can possibly produce it, and make sure your corporate network is secure, right? It's not just about what I'm buying from you, but it's about what an adversary can do with the information that you have in your corporate network. I also want to thank you all for the work that you're doing to identify breaches and then to share them with the government. So like we talked a little bit about today, I think one of the most powerful and important things we can do is together identify when something bad is happening and together work to stop it. The State Department has a crazy mission, and we're all over the place, physically located all over the place. I know that we are getting attacked right now, and I know that we're going to be attacked robustly in the future. So I really appreciate you all working and collaborating with us as we try to protect the State Department data and achieve our mission of promoting democracy. I think we are out of time, but I really appreciate you coming. Good morning. Welcome to RSA.
Yeah. Thank you.